Well, I lied. That was not the last video. I've actually got one more very quick video for you of something that I promised at the beginning of class, and here and there throughout I've mentioned it, but then almost forgot to explain what the deal was with this thing. Okay, well, the title gives it away. It's my death whistle. What I was thinking of when I was thinking of the last lecture for the course is the last lecture for the course the way that it was originally laid out. But as you might be able to tell over the course of me teaching this multiple times, I'm slowly infiltrating and making it more my own.
Smith will suffice.
Anyway, illusions and death whistles. We're not going to talk about a ton of speech and auditory illusions. There are some, but that's not exactly what the class is. Although someday I'd love to teach a class just on speech and sound illusions and why they're so fun. But I do want to talk about this first one. This is something called the equal loudness contour. It's sort of an illusion. It's also not. I mean, it's just the way that we hear things. But essentially, the crux of what this is showing you is that we don't perceive all intensities equally. What I mean is, different frequencies are going to seem louder or softer just because of how high or low they are. So let's see. Let me switch this over to a laser pointer really quickly. Okay. So what you can see is, let's just choose one of these lines to talk about, right? So we'll choose the bottom one, not the dotted red one. Minimum audible field is a weird way of just saying like threshold. So that's what the dotted line is, just like how quiet can you play something so that humans can detect it. And that's what that's what threshold is, that's what the dotted line is how quietly you can play a sound so that we can detect it. But if we look at the solid line right up from that, you can see that this is played at, I think what they're using here is phones, which is just a measurement of loudness. But if we go over all the way down, this is our frequency on this axis down here. So here at the beginning, we're starting at 20 hertz. Why are we starting at 20 hertz? Well, the human range of audible frequency is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. This graph only goes up to 15 kilohertz because, as we've talked about, do we really hear all the way up to 20,000 hertz? Some of us do, a lot of us don't. So it kind of stops there because we really, just like everybody in this class, I'm guessing has some diminished hearing in that upper frequency range. Even if you're 19, it's just something that very young children are able to do, and then we kind of start tailing off from there. So anyway, 15 is really where we need to be, and that's where all of the information that we need to get mostly is as well. We're not really losing out on anything in that upper 5,000 hertz. Anyway, so if we follow this line down, starting at 20 hertz, we need a lot of intensity in that 20 hertz signal to actually be able to hear it. So it sounds like 10 phones. That's a measure of loudness, not actually intensity. So phones is going to be how loud it sounds, and then you can see over here, these are at intensities. These are actual like sound pressure levels, right? Decibels. So the actual intensity, and then this is the perceived loudness. So you have to play something at, this looks like about 75 decibels here for it to sound like 10 phones at 20 hertz. Now remember, 20 hertz is super low. Not everybody can hear all the way down to 20 hertz. Very low. You'd need a huge like a huge cab speaker to be able to play something this low. As we get higher in frequency, as we move up, you see that the amount of actual intensity we need to have something sound like 10 phones drops off pretty steeply. And by the time we get to something that we can definitely hear, 60 hertz, well, now we're down to only 40 decibels to make it sound like 10 phones. So we've dropped 35 decibels. And we keep dropping until we plateau near 300, between 300 and 400. We stop dropping off steeply. One of the reasons that this looks kind of like it's changing all the way throughout is because it is a log scale. So you can see that like the distance from 20 to 30 is really large, and then the distance from 80 to 100 is really small, and the distance from 800 to 1000 is just as small as 80 to 100. This is a log scale. So in our actual experience, there's quite a plateau here, right? From 200, 300, something like that, all the way up to about 1500 right here. It's pretty flat spectrum. So around there, we only need 10 decibels to sound like 10 phones. Okay, cool. And this is, approximately equivalent. Here is where we're actually perceiving something that's close to what the actual intensity is. But then when we get up here, we take a noticeable dip. This means that we need even less of that sound to sound like 10 phones. We need about 5 decibels of a 3,000 and 4,000 hertz tone to sound like 10 phones. And why is this? Well, this corresponds to the resonant frequency of the ear canal. So between 2 and 5 or 3 and 4, somewhere in there, depending on where you draw your line. So I'd say around 2 it starts to drop off, and then it comes back up by 5, but it's really far down here between 3 and 4. So you could say, you can make a case for 2 to 5. You can make a case for 3 to 4. Either way, in that range, that is the resonant frequency of the ear canal. So what's going on there is it is accentuating these frequencies between 2,000 and 5,000 hertz. Everything that's coming through the ear canal between 2 and 5,000 is getting accentuated by the ear canal, by the resonance in the ear canal. So to us, when it gets to our brain, it's actually seems louder than it had been in the world. Now, what's really interesting about this is the second formant for babies is right in that region. So this right here, this is from a pretty recent paper looking at just the spectral content of baby cries. And you can see that the first formant is down here. The second formant is this bar of red right here, centered on 5,000, a little bit lower. So this baby is a little bit higher than typical, but the average from this paper, they're saying, is around 4,000 hertz for the second formant of the baby crying. So you get on an airplane, and it sounds like the loudest thing on there is the baby who's crying. And in a way, it's true. Even if you measured it with a sound level meter, it might not look like the baby is the loudest thing, but because you have this notch around between 3 and 4,000, it's going to be the loudest thing on the plane to you, for sure, because of the resonance of the ear canal. Now, this is functional, right? I mean, if it's our baby, we would prefer that we know that it's crying so we can see what's going on with it and stop it, take care of it. Multiple things. I mean, we want the baby to be okay. We also want this horrible noise to stop. So you get it from two directions. You get reinforced in two ways, right? Um, so it's functional, it's good. Who knows if there was some sort of evolutionary process that meant like, oh, the ear canal is this long, and that corresponds to increased, um, you know, survivability of babies, which then pushes on that genetic predisposition to have ear canals that are that long. I don't know. Perhaps. It also could just be chance, like we have ear canals that are that long, and a baby's F2 is right there. The F1 isn't right there. So maybe it just works that way. But it is interesting. And it does explain why baby cries are just so salient, right? Why they grab your attention so much, and why you can't really tune them out very well. So that is pretty interesting, I think. And another thing that I think is very interesting is the Aztec death whistle, which is just like the coolest name. So I've been teasing you with this all semester. This is mine, and I told you I was gonna tell you why it is so terrible. And this is why it's so terrible. Just kidding. I'm going to tease you again with the rest of the story about what this thing actually is. So, they found these things. This is a picture of one of them. In ruins in, Mexico, South America, not South America, Mexico and Central America mostly. And they look like this. This could be a replica. It looks pretty good. So I'm not sure that this is an actual one, though it could be. Some of the ones they found were in pretty good condition. But they were finding these things everywhere, and they had no idea what they actually were. So at first they thought they were just decorations, because we know that the Aztecs did some pretty morbid, stuff like human sacrifice, taking hearts out and stuff like that. So maybe, the archaeologists were just like, maybe they're just like goths and they love skulls, So then they noticed that they all had this little kind of like a spout up here at the top. And they thought, well, maybe they're drinking vessels. So it's possible that the really cool Aztecs just had these like skull drinking vessels, and they'd go to like fill it up with PSL and then like sip it as they, went to work or whatever. They also thought they could be religious items. Maybe you'd put some sort of scented oil in it, and it would be some sort of religious thing. This is like every archaeologist seems to think that anything that they can't totally explain is a religious item. So what ended up happening was a graduate student was running one of these things through an X-ray machine. I'm not sure if it's an X-ray. It could have been some sort of MRI or CT, something like that. They wanted to see what was going on inside of it. And the graduate student noticed that it looked like nasal passages, like what we've got going on in here. And they thought, that's weird, because I know, this is them talking, I know that like there's certain kinds of deer that have these interesting nasal passages, and they are able to blow sound through it and make a really loud resonant sound. So the graduate student picks it up, and they're like, well, just blow through it a little bit. And that's what ended up happening. And so people come running into the lab, and they're like, what is going on? And, the grad student's like, well, I just blew in the thing. I don't know. I think maybe it's a musical instrument. And they're like, music? What? So, but they do think it might not be a musical instrument. But they do think that it's the sound that that they were going for. I will tell you a little bit more of the rest of that story after we take a look at the spectral properties of the death whistle. So this is going to combine, this is like breaking up two worlds here. This is going to combine our regular lecture and our Pratt practice. Pratt practice? Okay, so let's see. That's not the Pratt window I want. That's the Pratt window I want. All right. So we'll do new, record a mono sound. Okay, now there's something else I'm going to do with this sound, and I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing in a second. Okay, so I will reveal that later. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is save to list and close, and now we can take a look at this sound. We'll zoom in a little. There we go. Oh yeah, that's a beautiful noise. Yuck. All right. Perfect. So this is the noise signal. You can see that there are some like formant bands, right? There's something going on in here that's not exactly just noise. It doesn't look just like the white noise that you used in the filter assignment, because that should be pretty much a uniform color. So there's something going on here. There are some formants. In fact, let's go to pitch. Let's see what it thinks pitch is. All over the place, right? There's no good answer for pitch, which we would expect. It's noise. Okay, let's see where it thinks the formants are, though. Aha! So it does see that there are some really prominent formants here. Interesting. Okay, let me get rid of this stuff. Okay, so I want to see... Oops, I'm not in the right place. There we go. Aha. Okay. So here's our spectral slice. And you can see that there's not a whole lot of harmonics going on here. There's not a lot of harmonicity to this signal. What do we got here? Wow, it starts high. 600, and then maybe about 1400. The next peak is 2760. There's a peak here at 35. There's one at 49. So there's nothing really harmonic about this signal at all, which is what we would expect to see. Okay, so now I will reveal to you what I was looking for when I played the death whistle just a little quieter. So remember how I said that it seemed like there were... That has to be speech. Yeah, that looks like me talking. Remember how I said that it seemed to that graduate student that there were nasal passages in the thing? There's actually multiple little resonation chambers, I guess, is what I'd call it. And this is... Okay, so this right here is the sound... I'm not sure if I have this set up so that you can hear what my computer's doing, but this, what you're looking at, is that sound. So now, if we want to show pitch here, aha, it gets a little bit more of an actual pitch contour here. There's something that we can actually look at that is pitch. So the spectrum is going all the way up to 5,000 here, but pitch, we can see over here on the right, is going up to 500. And so pitch, I would say, is saying that it's somewhere around 450 or something like that. And we can see that there's this really dark band right here. And that's probably where we're pulling our sound from, although it looks like this is almost twice as high. So maybe this is the second formant of what we've got here. Oh yeah, so right here our pitch is 417, and this formant right here is at 849. So that's about twice. This is like the second harmonic that we're actually seeing here, but still, this is, I'm not blowing hard enough to engage all of the different little chambers inside the death whistle. I'm only blowing enough to engage one chamber. So what you're seeing is, this is just one chamber. It's still kind of noisy. It's not a really great instrument. It's not a wonderful resonator or anything like that, but it is a little bit better than just the whole thing when you're listening to all the noise, right? So if we go back, we can see this is what all the noise looks like. Tons of noise. Pratt doesn't know what to tell me for where the pitch actually is. There's more formants. They're all over the place. There's a lot of noise in that as well because it's very dark. So, point there is, let's jump back to the slideshow. Boop. All right. These are the chambers. This is kind of what mine looks like. This, I think, is a 3D printed version right here. And that's kind of what's going on inside of mine as well. There's this tube, which sets up one resonance. There's this bowl, which sets up another resonance. And then there's this outer area, which sets up a third resonance. And then mine actually has, which this one doesn't show, mine has these cuts at the back, which allow air to come out in yet other areas. And you can see that they're all different sizes, which sets them up to resonate in different ways as well. Couple that with the fact that the air that comes out, I'm then cupping with my hand to create one more resonant chamber. And what's going on with these is none of them are in sync with each other. Like the shape of this one does not create a resonant frequency that is in harmonic alignment with this chamber. And both of them are not in harmonic alignment with the resonant frequency of this tube. And in mine, nothing's in harmonic alignment with the cuts on the back. They're all out of whack with each other. So you get this turbulent noise, you get all of these things that are trying to make a sound, but can't exactly because they're not in harmonic alignment with each other. Now that is different than everything we've been talking about, because all we've been talking about are things like tuning forks, right? Which have an extremely, let's do that, hit myself on the back of the head trick again, which have an extremely good harmonic alignment. There's one frequency that comes out of the sky. We've been dealing with things like Helmholtz resonators, which if we were to put this tube right on top of this bowl, that might be a Helmholtz resonator, but then this thing right here really kind of changes the whole ball game. So we've been dealing with Helmholtz resonators that has one resonant frequency. We've been dealing with things like this tube, which is a circle, two open ends, right? So it has very specific resonant frequencies that are in harmonic alignment with each other, even if some are anti-resonances because I have it capped off. We've been dealing with things like the human voice, which has mostly harmonic frequencies and very little inharmonicity, unless there's some sort of pathology going on. Instruments. When we talk about my guitar in the very beginning of class, that is really harmonic. A recorder, doo-doo-doo, That's really harmonic. I'm looking around for all the other things that I have from throughout the class just sitting around. I might have reached the end of what I have sitting around me. So it's all harmonic. This is true. I mean, we talked about this in the very first lecture about what waves are, is that waves are just ubiquitous everywhere. Harmonic waves are ubiquitous everywhere. Speech, animal vocalizations, the wind rustling through leaves and grass. It sets up harmonic frequencies. So, something like this is unnatural. It's not harmonic. It's not, it violates all the natural regularities that we've learned about what constitutes an auditory object. An auditory object is just something that creates sound, right? I'm an auditory object. My voice, my mouth is an auditory object. There's a very specific way that it functions. There's a set of harmonic frequencies and some resonances and anti-resonances there as well, but those are all playing on my harmonic frequencies. So there's a set of harmonic frequencies that are in alignment with each other, both in time and in space, and we can then localize where these auditory objects are. That's true for any musical instrument, most animal vocalizations as well. They all have those same natural properties. But with something like this, it's hard to hear it as a single thing, right? I mean, that's just one whistle. But it just kind of fills up your whole auditory scene, and it takes everything up, and it doesn't seem like it's just one thing. It seems like it's a big explosion of noise. It's hard to localize for that reason. I mean, when you have somebody whistling or saying hey, playing a musical instrument, all of these harmonics are in alignment with each other. It's easy for us to use natural regularities that we've learned to say, oh, that sound is coming from over there. You'll learn a lot more about localization in, I believe it used to be called psychoacoustics. I'm not sure what it's called anymore. It might be called hearing science. But you'll learn a lot more about that in there, about localization. But we can use these frequencies to localize. Well, when you have something that's playing frequencies that are not in alignment with each other, like most sounds, it is hard for our auditory system to localize this because we're not sure what goes together. What harmonics go with what? Does that harmonic, which is not in alignment with everything else, actually go with this? So it's difficult for us to localize. In fact, I've done research with this little Aztec death whistle right here that shows that people are both more inaccurate at pointing to where the death whistle is, and they take longer to identify where it actually is. So they're both less accurate and slower to identify where the death whistle is. And all that's showing is that when you have something that isn't a harmonic sound, like everything that you've been looking at, it's harder for us to deal with it because we've learned, our brains, our ears essentially have learned what a sound is. And you know now everything that we've talked about in here, you know what a sound is. You know that there's a fundamental frequency which sets up harmonic alignment. We can change the relative amplitudes of the harmonics to create different vowels. We can do all sorts of things to those, but you're not getting rid of the harmonic alignment. Even our consonants, when we have noisy consonants like sh, stuff like that, those appear briefly, right? Those are going to come in, and then we're going to have a vowel or a semi-vowel or something like that, or a nasal that has harmonic content. So most of our speech has harmonic content. And those consonants are mostly just there to break up the harmonic content to change the sound to make a different meaning for us. So, that is pretty much it. Yes, that's all I wanted to say about that. Kind of a good summary of the rest of class. So hopefully I saved the best for last. I think the two coolest things that I have are like the thing that you see first. Well, not this time. The thing that you should see first is the tuning fork and my death whistle. So, oh, there we go. It's not going to stay. All right. Well, hopefully this was interesting, enlightening, and fun. There is one last assignment for you to do, but it should be easy and fun as well. So, good luck on your exams, the exam for this portion, and if you choose to take the final, good luck on the final. And perhaps I'll see you in future classes. Bye.